Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints, one of our favorites, joining us now on the West Her hotline. Hey, Ross, I don't know if you knew that. It's again, like kind of weird circumstances coming together, but this is the most expensive Bills ticket of the season.
Yeah, that's a little shocking to hear, if I'm to be honest, but it makes sense, the idea that, it's the one predictable weather situation at noon on a Sunday. I get that it has a lot more to do with that than the opponent, I imagine.
Yeah, and we've begun a spoiled life here a little bit, where we're not liking the primetime games as much, and it's 1 o'clock Sundays just can be a treat. So that's a big reason why. The other weird thing about this game, I don't know if you knew this, Ross, is this is the final year Highmark Stadium. That's another big reason, I think. Just like the final great weather 1 o'clock game at the stadium before next year they move across the street. The Saints have the best record all time at Highmark Stadium. 4-1.
That part I did know. Yeah, that part I did know. It was pretty surprising. I remember back to like a 2017 game where the Saints had a lot of success on the ground, and that ended up propelling them to a win and things like that. Like, they've had some of those kind of weird, wonky games over there. Then maybe this adds to the list.
That is the game where the Saints, I think, ran the ball 25 times in a row or something, and the Bills were just totally embarrassed.
Is that Kamara and Ingram?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kamara, Ingram, and then I think it was even there was another back. I want to say maybe Dwayne Washington, perhaps. That ripped off some big run or something like that.
There was
in the game.
That's when I think it really became demoralizing in that game. It wasn't just Kamara and Ingram. Like, the third string guy came in and was ripping off big runs. Obviously, Ross, I think Bills fans are more optimistic about what we'll get in this game. It's the biggest spread in the league of the season so far. Is there anything in your mind that a Bills fan should be worried about on the Saints side? Like, what part of their team roster, if you can make a case for anything, would you say is the most threatening to a big favorite?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd make a case specifically for anything, but I would say that, when you have a team like New Orleans where there's not a lot of expectations around them, where the performances honestly haven't been great, when you're coming off of a game where you get shellacked 44-13, that maybe there's a little bit of angriness that comes into a game, a little bit of anger that comes into a game on an any given Sunday type of situation that could potentially propel the Saints into being, I would say, a bit more of a contender than they were expected to be. Not necessarily that there's an upset of brewing or anything like that, but if there was going to be anything that was going to propel this New Orleans Saints team into being a bit more competitive than maybe initially expected going into this Week 4 matchup against, a Super Bowl contender, reigning MVP, two-time, back-to-back MVP probable and everything, that maybe, just maybe, it's the anger coming off of a complete butt whipping that they experienced over in Seattle. And then I would say that, the Saints' run game has had some success, and I know that run defense in Buffalo has been a little bit of a vulnerability. And so if the Saints end up finding a way to control the game there, that's maybe where things can get a little bit tricky. But I wouldn't say that there's anything necessarily to be completely intimidated by when it comes to this New Orleans Saints team.
Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints here on the Western Hotline. DiBiase, Nate Geary. Going back to last week, it was over quick on the scoreboard. I mean, if you were on the Sunday ticket quad box, you might have never gone to it because of the score in Seattle. What really happened last week in your mind that had it get away from the Saints so quickly?
Yeah, New Orleans was just so unprepared at all three phases in this game. Kellen Moore came out after the game and immediately talked about how, this was a loss in all three phases. They had issues on offense, defense, and special teams. You saw the punt return touchdown, the longest punt return touchdown in Seattle's history, 95-yarder, a 60-yard kick return, a blocked punt, an interception that got called back that then turned into a missed field goal. A bunch of short fields for Seattle, which made things really tough for the Saints defense. I think all of those things just compounded very, very quickly. You had a 38-point, game, or you surrendered 38 points to a team that didn't convert a third down in the first half and that ran the football only 8 times in the first half and that ran only 20 plays on offense. That doesn't happen very often, but when a game runs away from you like that and that freight train moment happens to you, that's a challenging thing to try to bounce back from. So I think that the Saints is a rebuilding, young-ish team that got young in a hurry and in some cases against their own will. That is a game where it was just a Murphy's Law situation, that everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and a lot of it happened because of a lack of preparedness at all three phases of the game.
I was mentioning, Ross, that this has to be one of the most difficult 2-week stretches for any team in the NFL in terms of travel, going from the highest point in the West Coast nearly up to the furthest point on the East Coast in back-to-back weeks with very little rest in between. Add that to the fact that they've got a second-year quarterback in Spencer Rattler, who, last year I don't think got a real great look at it with the weapons surrounding him. Chris Olave back this year. What are your thoughts through 3 games of Rattler? And I mean, I do think, does everybody assume we're going to see Shuck at some point? I mean, they did spend a second-round pick on him.
Yeah, I think that there's an assumption that he'll be on the field at some point this season, but when that happens, it's going to be entirely up to Spencer Rattler. Spencer has had a strong season in comparison to his 6 starts last year. The issue is that he's 0-9, and everybody's going to look at win-loss record and everything like that. But I think the Saints think of him more as 0-3 than 0-9. I don't know how much they're really putting stock into the kind of wonky situation that was the 2024 season and those 6 starts and losses. And so I think instead the Saints are kind of looking at this as starting from the beginning of the 2025 year. And I think the best way to describe what Spencer Rattler has done is that he's not been the reason why this team has lost games, but he's also not been the reason that they're winning games either. Like, that's an offense that had the football at the end within one possession at the end of the game in the first 2 weeks up against the Arizona Cardinals, where he actually delivered the pass that he needed to deliver that could have given them the opportunity to tie or take a lead, depending upon what they wanted to do with the point after situation there. But unfortunately, the ball was dropped and broken up. And then in the San Francisco game, just couldn't really get the offense moving at the end of that game. And so I think that there's a fair balance to be struck in terms of what the expectations of Spencer Rattler are versus what the performance so far has been, which is that he's not been of detriment to the team at all, but he also hasn't been able to elevate the team just yet either. And so I think that, you come off of this game against the Bills, which we're all expecting to be, a not so great showing for the team. But if he ends up looking fine coming out of that game, then he probably gets another couple of weeks. He's got the New York Giants and then the New England Patriots on the way. If he can't get wins in those games, then I think that's maybe when the Tyler Shuck noise gets a little bit louder. But as of right now, it's full commitment and full steam ahead with Spencer Rattler until he otherwise sort of changes everybody's mind.
What do you think this offense looks like with him at the helm against the Bills? Do you think is he one to let it fly? Do you think they try to keep it as conservative as possible to keep the game close? What would you expect from the Saints offense on Sunday?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk from them right now about them being more aggressive going into this game. I don't know that I buy it. We'll see. I think being aggressive is probably the right thing to do. I don't think that you go into a game where, you have a potential 30-team split in between where you are and where they are in the NFL and play it safe, But I don't necessarily think that always means airing it out and taking all these deep shots and things like that. Like, you have in the New Orleans Saints a pretty good rushing offense that might start its full, healthy starting offensive line for the first time this season in this week. And you've got a lot of guys that are physical people movers going up against a defense that can be moved in the run game. And so I think you try to establish that first, and then you let the rest of the game come to you from that. The Saints have faced 69.6% of the time light boxes, 6 or fewer defenders. If you can change that, then all of a sudden you have an opportunity to maybe push that ball downfield and get more aggressive. So I would say that early on in the game, it'll be about setting up the aggression, even if it's not immediately tapping into that aggression, but they've got to earn that. And I think the run game is where that's all going to start.
Ross Jackson with us on the West Her Hotline. Some of the veteran players, you mentioned like they're a young-ish team. They do still have some of these veteran players that are around the roster in roles. Mm-hmm. Are there obvious names that you think are players that, like here in Buffalo or Kansas City, whoever is going to be looking to buy come trade deadline time, which I know we're still a ways away from, that you think are going to be obvious names that the Saints might be looking to sell?
Yeah, I think so. I think that that's definitely something that could come to fruition, and it could be some veteran names, and it could be some young names too. I mean, look, I'm not advocating for certain things here, but when it comes to the just real possibility of a team that's looking to potentially build some assets, the Saints have some young pieces and they have some veteran pieces they could potentially be interested in moving. Alvin Kamara is a guy that I would say to watch out for, depending upon how the season goes. Chris Olave going into his 5th-year option, that's a very tradable situation there. I think that there's a lot of different places where the Saints could potentially go if they get into a point to do that. And look, I'm not saying that those players are performing so poorly that they deserve to be traded. I'm saying that they are really good players and talented players and promising players on a rudderless ship right now. And sometimes what you need to do as an organization is put those players in better situations and get a return from that. And the Saints have traded away a bit more of their 2026 draft than I would have expected going into the season. And so maybe there will be some opportunities to recoup some of those draft picks and things like that with players like them. Corner Alante Taylor over on the backside, who's a really, really talented young guy in a contract year as well. And so there could definitely be those players that end up, recouping some assets for New Orleans that put them in some better situations while the Saints and navigate this rebuild and get things figured out.
Yeah, Olave's interesting because he's still young enough, right? 25 years old, but they're going to have to decide whether or not they want to pay him. And how is that going this year? You just by looking at the stats, you see a ton of targets and not a lot of production. But I guess even maybe the fact that he's on the field healthy is a good start for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a big part of it. And he was, a big part of the game plan last week, early and often, but just didn't have a lot of space in the passing game, the Saints did in those situations, because Seattle knew exactly what it was they wanted to do. It's the advantage of going up 3 scores in the first quarter, right? Is that, okay, well, the team's going to, there's no rushing downs here. This is going to be all passing. And so put a shell over the top and dare them to run if they want to, but otherwise take away all the big plays. The Saints have 1 completion so far this season of 25 yards or more, and there's only 1 pass catcher in New Orleans that averages more than 10 yards, and that's tight end Jack Stoll. It's not Chris Olave. It's not Rashid Shaheed, who's a guy that was averaging 17-plus yards in a couple of his seasons. That's not been the game plan for New Orleans so far. It's not for lack of trying. They just haven't been able to connect there, and they also haven't been able to get open there because of the game situations, game flow, and I'm sure as well with some of the execution has been an issue too. And so I think that it's tough to gauge kind of how things have gone for Chris Olave because the offense itself has remained super condensed. But he's gotten open and he's gotten his opportunities. And so, but I think that there's a lot more to his game. There's a lot more to those other receivers as well that can be kind of on display if they finally get to a point where they're opening up this offense and then connecting on some of those deeper shots, those chunk plays, those big plays.
Yep, Shaheed's a lot of fun, obviously, too. Ross Jackson on the Western Hotline. You can actually check out, he was on with Joe Marino. They did a crossover episode, Locked on Bills, Locked on Saints, so good stuff there, previewing the game as well. Thanks, Ross, as always, and enjoy the game on Sunday.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks so much for having me on. Y'all take care, stay safe, and I look forward to talking to you here again soon.
Definitely.